This is Raythe from Raythe Reign. I'm an author of serialized gay romance fiction. Every week on this podcast, I'll be reading a chapter from one of my gay fantasy shifter serials called Dragon's Reign. I'll explain at the break how you can find out more about this story and others I write. So let's get to it. Chapter 112, Cat and Mouse. Landry stayed out of the open areas. Caden tracked her as she slipped between houses, raced across backyards, and jumped fences. She was faster than he remembered her to be, but then again, she was a shifter now. Often she would lift her head to look up at the sky as his and Iolair's shadow fell over her. And when that happened, she would speed up even more and snake towards the narrowest of side yards, where there was no chance of him getting the drop on her. She appeared to be heading towards the high wall that separated the mid from high reach. There were entrances to the tunnels and staircases there. If she made it to one of those before Caden and Iolair cut her off, they would likely lose her. And Caden was not losing her. More than just anger and fear fueled him now. When he had told Valerius and Larian to remain behind, he and Iolair had chosen to take on the mantle of protection of Reach alone. They needed to keep the people safe, no matter what. His feelings for Landry right now were complicated. He had no idea how much of her, if anything, was left. But he was haunted by the idea that Landry was inside of that body with the behemoth, crying out to him, with him simply being unable to hear her. But killing her was not what he intended anyways. He wanted answers from the behemoth. "She's heading between those two buildings, Iolair. What do you say about some frost breath?" Caden suggested. They would be able to drop down and send a gush of super cold breath between a 2-story hardware store and a single-story home. There was enough room for them to get their head between the buildings and wrap Landry in a cocoon of ice. Iolair hooted in agreement. They dropped down and hovered at the back of the house and hardware stores just as Landry dashed between them. They stuck their head forward, their jaws opening, and let out a blast of icy air. The air went white before their eyes. It wasn't until the frosty fog cleared that they could see that the sides of the structure and the ground were all covered in slick ice. But Landry was not caught in it like an insect in amber. Caden didn't see her anywhere at first, but then there was the tinkling sound of breaking glass from the far side of the house. She must have boosted herself up into one of the windows on the side of the house, run through the house, and then thrown herself out of the window at the front. Lights immediately appeared in several rooms in the home as people were roused from their beds. "What on earth is that, Jacob?" A woman's voice, high and tight, rang out. A man's voice, not much deeper, answered, "I don't know, Mary. Oh my God! The white dragon is outside!" "What? Let me see," Mary responded. The curtains in the back room opened, and Caden saw a man and woman, Jacob and Mary, staring up at them in shock. Their mouths were open, and they were pointing. Both were in night clothes and looked as if they might faint. Sorry, Caden called, though they couldn't hear him as they rose up into the air again. They caught a flash of white as Landry dashed across the street and entered the business district that separated the single-family homes that comprised most of Landry's old neighborhood from the wall to High Reach. "Come on, Iolair, we need to get ahead of her. Then we shift and slip down between the buildings," Caden suggested. Iolair agreed and hooted. The business district was not laid out in a nice grid, but instead consisted of buildings of every shape and size that sat so close to one another that it would be a tight squeeze for Caden to walk between them with his shoulders facing forward in places. No part of their dragon form, except for the tip of their tail, could have made it between there. They shot forward so that they would be at least a building's length ahead of Landry, or at least where they thought she went. The darkness between the buildings was deep, and the roofs overhung many of the narrow passages between the buildings. "Here, let's shift," Caden told his spirit. And within half a second, they were in their human form and plummeting towards the ground. Caden could have touched the sides of the buildings if he had reached his arms out, but instead he kept them tucked closely against his chest. He landed lightly with one leg bent and the other stretched out behind him. He immediately straightened and looked for Landry ahead of them. She had skidded to a halt the moment she saw him drop from the sky and started to backtrack. "Oh, no, you don't," Caden growled. He started to run. The ground was wet, and the fetid scent of garbage wafted all around them. There was broken glass and loose asphalt that bit into the soles of his feet. He felt the squish of rotting things between his toes. But Caden kept going. Landry dashed down a slightly wider alleyway between the backs of two buildings. It was narrow, but had room for the large trash bins. Caden raced after her. She was fast, but not as fast as him and Iolaire. As he spun into the turn, he saw her just 20 feet away. She looked over her shoulder, eyes wide between the heavy bangs, just as he drew in a breath. She put more pep in her step before grabbing one of the large green trash containers and wrenched it into his path. His breath painted the front of the trash bin an icy white. It also effectively blocked his way forward, but that didn't stop him. Caden launched himself up into the air onto the top of the trash bin and then jumped down to the other side. Landry had used that momentary distraction to give herself time to grab one of the large metal bins by the bottom wheels and heft it over her head. Such a feat for a human would have been impossible. Caden was reminded of how easily Valerius and Esme had tossed around the dungeon's door. Landry tossed a trash bin at him. He ducked. It flew over his head and crashed into the bin that he had just leaped from. He was up again just in time for Landry to send another trash can flying towards him. He didn't have time to duck. Instead, he brought both arms instinctively in front of his face and 6 inches away from him. The trash bin hit his forearms and wrapped around them and him like some kind of metal cloak. The impact didn't even have him sliding back in the slick mush of rotten vegetables and who knew what else. There was no pain either. His forearms didn't even sting from the impact, but he was stunned nonetheless, and that gave Landry the time she needed to wheel away from him once more. He hefted himself over the second trash bin and was after her. She skidded yet around another corner. Her hair and the back of one leg was all he saw of her. He mimicked the running style of the Terminator, with arms and legs pumping. "We need to catch her before she makes it to the wall," Caden cried. Iolaire shifted its weight in his chest so its head was down and wings outstretched, as if that would make him more aerodynamic. He wasn't sure if it did have some effect, but he was running faster. Caden almost laughed with the joy of this incredible physicality that he had never known. He flew around another corner, and he saw that Landry was already at the end of the thoroughway between the two buildings, a furniture store on his left and a bookstore on his right, if he remembered correctly, and was about to cross the road to where the wall stretched up and up and up towards where High Reach sat. "She's getting away, Iolaire!" His spirit let out a breath of ice, and Caden realized what he needed to do. He kept moving, but he sent a blast of icy breath, not at Landry's back, but at her feet. Ice coated the cracked sidewalk that she'd burst out upon. Her feet went out from under her. She nearly spun in a circle before she hit the ground with a painful thud. Caden winced, but she immediately was trying to scrabble to her feet again and take off towards the wall. He drew in another breath and coated her with an icy blanket that held her in place. Everything but her head was covered in ice. It was the same thing that he'd done to the bombers, but unlike them, she fought wildly and with the strength of a hydra shifter. He saw her head whipping back and forth. The ice creaked all around her. Caden sent another breath that added an additional ice layer, stopping the creaking. He slowed nearly to a stop as he reached her. He walked calmly around her frozen form so that he could see her face. Her lips were writhed back from her teeth in a silent snarl. Her eyes were full of rageful nightshine. She hissed at him when she caught sight of him. He realized it wasn't just a hiss when Iolaire hooted excitedly and a mist seethed through her clenched teeth. Caden hopped back a step and, like he had in the bedroom, blew the fear gas away. Landry's hair also flew back and ice crystals formed on the strands. "Don't do that again, or I'll just put a nice little ice mask over your mouth," Caden warned. She glared at him, but no more gas left her now closed lips. "Now, that's better," he said. "That was a nice little game of cat and mouse we played there." He knew he should shift, snatch Landry off the sidewalk in her frozen cocoon, and head back to Valerius and Larian. But he wanted a minute to talk to her without her brothers there. He wanted to know if there was any part of Landry still inside of this body. Please let there be. Landry, can you hear me?" he asked as he studied her eyes between the oily strands of hair. Landry's eyes changed from distrustful to wide and limpid. Caden? Is that you? Oh my God, what's going on? Where am I? Am I in ice? Iolaire let out a concerned hoot. It didn't know if this really was Landry or not. Caden didn't respond. He was looking into her eyes. The voice was right. Not like the other mocking voice she had used in the bedroom. But then again, the behemoth had been able to mimic her normal voice before switching to its own version. Caden, why aren't you saying anything? You have to get me out of here, she cried and weakly struggled against the ice restraints. I'm going to freeze. I don't think so, Caden said softly. Even if you were human, you wouldn't freeze. But you're a shifter now, so I doubt you even feel the cold. Shifter? Caden, are you crazy? Landry cried. It's me, Landry. I'm as human as human as... So you don't remember going through the wall? He asked. The wall? I can see you in her eyes, behemoth, Caden said as he caught sight of a smirk on her lips that she failed to hide and a shining light in the darkness. She went silent and regarded him without any emotion. Iolaire's wings curled around itself. It didn't like being near even this small part of the behemoth. Did you know that you can get some of my gay romance books for free? Every month, I have at least one book free to download right from Amazon, so you can easily read it on any device. But these books can only be free for 5 days at a time. If you don't want to miss out, just sign up for my mailing list, and I'll send you an email whenever there's a free book available. The link to the sign-up form is in the description down below. Is she still in there? Can she be brought back? Caden didn't expect answers to these questions. Of course, the behemoth said with another secret smile. Why would I give up the protection of her soul? It makes you and all the other dragon shifters hesitate. You value the human in her because of the humans and all of you. Caden knew that he wasn't going to be sure of whether this was true or a lie. Not now, maybe not ever. Iolaire twittered that they should go back to Valerius and Raziel. It wanted the comfort of Raziel's wings, and it wanted to make sure that its mate had fully recovered. Caden agreed, but he just couldn't move quite yet. Why are you doing this? Caden breathed. He hadn't even meant to ask this question, let alone again, to expect an answer, but the behemoth did answer in a way. Why are you doing this? The behemoth asked. Caden frowned. Because Iolaire and I were meant to be joined. Through me, Iolaire gets to experience this world, and through Iolaire, I get to experience what it is to be more than myself. And why would it be any different for me? The behemoth asked. Because you hold no love for the people you've possessed, Caden said, feeling it as much as Iolaire telling him it was so. You're not meant to be with Landry or any of the people you've anchored yourself to. A smirk crossed Landry's face that made her so ugly compared to her normal looks. It was as if she wasn't her at all. Human souls are weak, like candle flames in a hurricane, she said. I don't anchor myself in them so much as offer my protection. And then, Landry, Ross, and Harvey would never have hurt their parents, yet you had them hostage, Caden pointed out. You might promise many things, but then you break every one. Only to those who do not listen carefully to what I offer, the behemoth said. All you offer is slavery and death, Caden said, certain of this too. To humans, yes. But to my fellow spirits, I show another way. The behemoth's eyes were filled with an eerie light. It reminded Caden of dead light, white, silver light that was cold and terrible, that led people astray. What other way? Caden scoffed. Have you not heard of the power struggle that takes place between the human soul and the spirit after joining? Even your Valerius and Raziel fought terrible battles over who would be in charge. The behemoth sounded utterly amused. Caden did remember Valerius telling him that many spirits and the humans they joined with did have trouble agreeing to do things in the beginning. He and Iolaire hadn't had such problems, but he liked to think that it was because both of them were easygoing. He definitely wanted the best for Iolaire and vice versa, so they had been working things out together. Shifters and their spirits find harmony, Caden told her. No, spirits bend to shifters. the behemoth said with a shake of her head. They must, because this is your world, and when they bond with you, they become lesser. Caden scowled. No, that's not. I am proof of that. I did not bond with Landry or any of the others. I just use them as the empty shells they are, the behemoth said with evident glee. The spirits who see what I have done realize that they don't have to bind themselves to you. They can just take your bodies and have the experiences they want here. Caden thought of the press of so many spirits wanting to bond with humans, but there were limits now on who they were compatible with. They also had to wait until people were in near-death situations. But what the behemoth was suggesting was that the spirits simply push out, or at least push to the side, the souls of the humans. No, he and Iolaire breathed, feeling how wrong that was. At that moment, a car came around the serpentine road, and the headlights caught both him and Landry in full beam. Caden turned, shading his eyes, as the car came to a stop and the window was rolled down. Are you the White Dragon King? A young woman asked in breathless tones. Yes, I am. There's nothing to see here, he said stupidly. There was clearly a whole lot to see here. Move along now. Is that a bomber? A guy called out of the driver's side. There were at least 3 more people in the back seat who were urging the 2 in front to get out so that they could see too. Caden grimaced. Iolaire, sometimes I really wished we had force powers, so you could say, these aren't the droids you're looking for, and by droids, I mean us and Landry. Iolaire cocked its head to the side. The reference was a little beyond it. Don't worry, buddy, Caden said. I promise, once things calm down, I'll show you all of these things. Iolaire twittered with enthusiasm, but then went back to being anxious about Landry, or really the behemoth, and all of these people around. There were a few flashes. Caden blinked rapidly as his night vision was impacted by the bright light. Can we get selfies with you? The girl from the passenger side asked. Not right now, I have to. Oh my God, I want one with the ice princess, the guy from the driver's seat crowed. Me too, one of the people in the back called and tried to climb out of the car. Guys, really, I need you to. Holy hell! Caden gasped the last. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw there was a rusty set of double doors cut into the wall, which opened with a screech. Behind them were dozens of people. They all stared at Caden with identical looks of hate. Their eyes were full of nightshine. Get in the car, Caden commanded the kids. They had all frozen at the sight of the silent, staring group of people in the doorway. What the hell is going on? The girl whimpered. This bad, way bad, the guy mumbled. Get in the car, Caden repeated. You can't stop us all, Landry said simply. And then all hell broke loose. The kids moved to jump back into the car. The people in the doorway surged forward as if a tidal wave of hate. Caden turned and used his ice breath to push the people back into the tunnel they were rushing out of like rats. The car revved up and then, with screaming tires, raced forward directly into Caden's frost breath. Thankfully, they had the windows up, but a layer of ice coated the windscreen and the passenger side windows. There was a scream as the driver lost control and the car veered to the right towards the sidewalk and the bookstore. Caden couldn't do anything. He watched in horror as the car headed towards a plate glass window with a book display beyond. And then there was something between the building and the car, or rather someone. Anwar. The silver dragon shifter was naked and must have been flying overhead when he and Evren saw the ensuing catastrophe. Anwar put his hands out and stopped the car. Thankfully, the young man had taken his foot off of the gas, but there was still a furrow in the concrete sidewalk behind one of his heels. Caden, though, did not have time to thank the silver dragon for appearing just when he needed him to. The momentary lapse in his ice breath had allowed the behemoth-possessed humans to surge past their partially frozen brethren. They surrounded Caden before he had a chance to blink. A man dressed in a ripped business suit punched him in the stomach before a woman in a yellow baby doll dress slammed her fist into the left side of his cheek. A slip of a girl in ratty shorts and a t-shirt that had seen better days kicked him in the shins. There were more people who struck him that he did not even have a chance to look at. Caden curled over, this time in pain. Unlike human blows, the behemoth's possessed ones could pack a punch. Caden put his arms over his head and tried to shield his body. Got a shift, Iolaire, Caden got out. But the concentration he needed to turn into their dragon form kept getting hit, kicked, kneed, and throttled right out of him. Pain bloomed in every limb. He tried pushing through the crowd of dozens of the possessed, but they surged back like the tide against him, and he was thrown back into the fray once more. He landed on his back and got stomped. All the air was driven out of his lungs, and he gasped in pain and shock. Iolaire gave out frantic cries of confusion and agony. There was a flash of light. The night turned to day. To his horror, he saw some of the possessed become like X-rays before they disintegrated into black ash and were blown away. Caden wanted to scream for Anwar to stop. These people might be innocent. They might be able to be saved. But someone kicked the side of his head, and Caden's consciousness flickered. Then a young boy's face was inches from his. The boy opened his lips, and Caden saw a gap-toothed grin as the boy exhaled some kind of gas that had Caden's vision blurring and his limbs going lax, even as he struggled to defend himself. "Valerius, in trouble." Caden got out. Someone had hold of his ankles. They were dragging him across the street. He was going in and out of consciousness as more foul breath was passing over his mouth and nose. He saw the threshold of the doors into the tunnels. They were taking him somewhere deep inside of reach. The doors clanged shut behind him, and the boy blew more gas into his face. Consciousness left Caden and Iolaire. I hope you're enjoying Dragon's Reign so far. Dragon's Reign is free for you to enjoy, but not free for us to make. There is a whole team working with me for audio editing, artwork, graphic design, and custom music. Most YouTube channels and podcasts have sponsors and take ads, but because of the kind of content we make, we can't run ads or get sponsors. Instead, we have other ways you can support me and the team behind this gay romance audiobook. One easy way is to buy or borrow my books from Amazon. They are all gay romance set in alternative worlds with vampires or shifters and other magical beings. You may not know that even if you borrow books with your Kindle Unlimited subscription at Amazon, they are free for you, but they still earn us money. The books are published under the name Ex Aratare, which actually means Raythe in Romanian. And if you love audiobooks, you can get professionally narrated versions of every one of my books on audible.com. The link to my author page is in the description below, as well as to the first book of the series I think you'll really like. Thank you so much for your support. People like you enable me and the team to keep writing these stories of gay romance, magic, monsters, and true love, and producing this very fun podcast for everyone. Thank you.